2020 election, we have seen an unprecedented spike in threats against the public servants who do administer our elections. Election officials, workers, and volunteers in communities across the country have been targeted with heinous acts and threats of violence. The following are a few examples of successful enforcement actions that the Justice Department has taken over the past year. In New Mexico, county commissioners and other elected officials were targeted with a series of shootings that the department has alleged in court papers were organized by an unsuccessful candidate for the state legislature who claimed that the election had been, quote, rigged against him. At least 3 of the shootings occurred while the intended victims or their children or their family members were at home. In February, 2 shooters who we alleged were recruited by the candidate pled guilty to carrying out the attacks. In March, the candidate himself was charged in the 13-count superseding indictment. In Arizona, a man sent a state election official a bomb threat warning that if she did not resign within 2 days, quote, the explosive device impacted in her personal space would be detonated. In March, the man was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison for making that threat. In Maricopa County, Arizona, an elections official, a county attorney, and their families were threatened by a defendant who called for, quote, a mass shooting of poll workers and election officials in precincts he believed had, quote, suspect results. His revolting comments included, quote, dead children burn into the memories of people. The county attorney who had been targeted later reported that he, his wife, and 4 children had been assigned round-the-clock protection and issued body armor in response to the threat. And the elections official who was targeted said in a victim impact statement that, quote, while I am the person directly threatened by this case, the impact of such threats is felt by a much larger community. The thousands of committed election workers who operate our democratic processes. When threats are made against any election worker, the impact reverberates throughout the entire community. That defendant was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. In recent months, our enforcement actions have continued. In July, we secured the guilty plea of an Alabama man who repeatedly threatened to kill Maricopa County election workers and officials. In one particularly chilling message, he said, quote, you better not come in my church, my business, or send your kids to my school. You are stupid if you think you are safe. His sentencing is scheduled for next month. Also in July, the Justice Department secured a 14-month sentence for a man who sent a death threat to a Michigan election worker. In a voicemail, he said, quote, 10 million plus patriots will surround you when you least expect it. And he added, we'll kill you. Less than 2 weeks ago, we charged and arrested a Colorado man for allegedly threatening the lives of election officials, judges, and law enforcement officials in both Colorado and Arizona. As I have said before, and I will reiterate again today, these cases are a warning. If you threaten to harm or kill an election worker or official or volunteer, the Justice Department will find you, and we will hold you accountable. In a democracy, people vote and argue and debate, often loudly, in order to achieve the policy outcomes they desire. And the Justice Department will continue to relentlessly protect the rights of all Americans to peacefully express their opinions, beliefs, and ideas. But the promise of our democracy is that people will not employ violence to achieve their preferred outcomes. The public servants who administer our elections must be able to do their jobs without fearing for their lives. That is why this task force has been marshaling the full resources of the Justice Department to aggressively investigate and prosecute threats targeting election workers, officials, and volunteers. And we will continue to do so in the months ahead, when the task force will build on the partnerships with state and local election officials and law enforcement officials tasked with protecting them. Since March, the task force has participated in more than 25 convenings, engagements, trainings, tabletop exercises, including both with our law enforcement partners and with our partners in the election community nationwide. Over the next several weeks, task force representatives will be on the ground meeting with election workers. And in early November, both in advance of and after Election Day, the FBI will be hosting federal partners at its headquarters command center to address events, issues, and potential crimes related to the elections in real time. Election officials and administrators do not need to navigate this threat environment alone. We are here to support them and to make sure they can safely carry out their critical work. Protecting our democracy and protecting our elections was a founding purpose when the Justice Department was established in 1870. The department answered that charge then, and we will answer that charge today as we confront those who would use violence or threats of violence to attack those who administer our elections.